Hi. So I picked up a Hydrasynth recently, sat down with it yesterday wanting to make some music, only to run into some frustrating latency issues. So after spending quite some time trying to figure out how to deal with that, I thought I'd make a video on just that topic, just in case you're dealing with similar issues. So the Hydrasynth, like many others, has a little bit of latency, meaning it takes a little bit of time from the moment it receives its clock or its MIDI signal to the moment the sound actually comes out of the unit. Let me just show you what I mean. I have a kit set up here on the Deluge with one row playing the Deluge-Synth, just a plain sawtooth, and one row sending MIDI to the Hydrasynth, also a plain sawtooth. Now let me make those snappier so we can actually hear the latency. Now if I sequence this and play it, we can hear that they're not actually playing at the same time, but one is slightly delayed. This is due to the amount of time it takes the Hydrasynth to generate its audio signal. Just so you can hear the difference, I'm getting out the Sirin here. Now if I play this, we can also hear a little bit of latency, but it's way better than on the Hydrasynth. So let me get rid of this again. By the way, I'm guessing this is a reference to Down Under or something, but I'm really not a fan of the MIDI ins and outs being upside down. So people on the internet don't entirely agree, but they say it's about 20 milliseconds, the latency on the Hydrasynth. I really don't care how much exactly it is. It's definitely audible, but let's not get angry at the world and just focus on how we can address this issue. On the Hydrasynth side of things, there's really not much we can do because it's just the amount of time it takes the synth to generate its audio. But that's fine, I guess. We all need time to process things. So let's look at what we can do on the Deluge to change this. There's really two ways we can deal with this. One is by moving the MIDI just a little bit to the left so we can give it a head start. So by the time the audio of the Deluge and the audio of the Hydrasynth get to the finish line, they're in the same place. You do this by scrolling all the way in because we want to move it only very slightly to the left. Then holding the pad of the instrument you want to move. And then you hold down the left right scroll button and you turn it to the left. So now they sync up pretty nicely. Keep in mind that the increment you're moving it by is a division of the grid, which means its actual time is different depending on the tempo of the whole thing. The smallest increment you can get is a 128th triplet, which would be the same thing as dividing one beat 96 times, which means at a tempo of 120 BPM, which is 2 beats per second, meaning one beat is 500 milliseconds, and then divide that by about 100, you get approximately 5 milliseconds per increment. The downside to this is if you have anything on the one of a beat, you're losing this the first time around because it gets moved to the very end of the sequence. You can avoid that by going the opposite way and just moving all the rest of your track one notch to the right. So I'm doing the same thing, scrolling all the way in, then holding the pad of this instrument and moving it to the right, which has a similar effect. Which one of those is better really depends on what it is you're doing on your Deluge. If you have a lot of stuff going on other than your external synth, it's probably better to move the external synth. If you only have like one groove going on, it's better to keep the synth in place and move everything else to the right, because then you're not losing that first note. Something I should mention here is that you can't nudge audio clips to the left or right. So if you have audio clips in your session, you're probably going to want to move your MIDI clip for your external synth to the left. The only thing you can do is load your audio clip into a kit as an instrument. But there you have to make sure you have the loop margins turned off during recording, or otherwise you're going to have to adjust the start and end point. And it's just a lot of work, so I suggest go with moving the MIDI clip. Either way, moving it to the left or to the right makes it really difficult to edit stuff afterwards. I suggest moving it back onto the grid for editing, and then once you're done, you move it back to where everything syncs up nicely. By the way, if you want to move an entire track, which happens quite often, let me set this up real quick. So I have a MIDI track here. Just punching in some notes. And let's make this a kick. You can easily hear it's a little bit off. So I'm going to move this to the left by holding down the up-down scroll knob and then turning the upper one. Oh, I have to scroll in first. Scroll in all the way and then do this, which moves it to the left. And now it sounds a lot better. So that's how it is. Neither of those options really are ideal because things get really messy and it's easy to forget to scroll in or forget to put things back in place before you start editing, and then it gets really messy. But that's just how it is. It would have been really nice to have per track delay settings independent of the actual sequencer, but you can't always get what you want, and this at least allows me to work around that and still have things in sync. If we're not sending actual MIDI to the external synth, but just using the clock, we're running into the same problem. Let me set this up real quick. I'm going to use LFO1 to trigger the filter envelope. Again, we can hear they're not playing exactly at the same time. Plus, in the very beginning, there's some jitter going on, and it takes a while for the LFO to sync up to the clock. Now, this is the easier problem to fix because we can actually notch the clock output of the Deluge. In this case, the Deluge is the master clock a little bit. So it syncs up with the audio output of the Hydrasynth again. You do this by holding the left-right scroll knob and then turning the tempo knob to the left. And now they're way better in sync. Another way to tackle this issue would be to just use the external synth's clock instead of the Deluge's clock. So let me try this. Now I'm setting the clock sync to the internal clock of the Hydrasynth, and on the Deluge I'm making sure that it's receiving MIDI clock. Yes, it's on. So that means things should work fine now, which they do. So this is how you can deal with clock issues when you're not sending actual MIDI notes from the Deluge to an external synth, but just using the clock that it sends or receives. Maybe I should mention here, if you're using multiple external synths that all receive a clock signal, there's also good external solutions for this. One device I would like to recommend there is the ERM multi-clock. I use it with a buddy of mine on stage, and it has solved all our MIDI clock syncing issues and just spared me a lot of headaches. It's great. So that's all I have to offer on this topic. If you know of other better ways to deal with those kinds of problems, please let me know. In any case, thank you a lot for watching.